is a strong belief that Russia's action is violating international law. I know President Putin seems to have a different set of lawyers making a different set of interpretations, but I don't think that's fooling anybody.
President Obama continuing to put pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin over his country's occupation of Ukraine. Morning and welcome. I'm Simon Constable. Well, as the crisis in Ukraine continues, again, we will devote our entire show to the topic. And we'll have some live reports from the hotspots in the region. But first, breaking news. The European Union says it will provide Ukraine with $15 billion of aid in the form of loans and grants. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Kerry is holding high-level talks in Paris. But, and it's a big but, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he will not attend. We're going to go live now to Meg Coker in Sebastopol, monitoring the situation on the ground. Thank you very much for being there, Meg.
Hi.
Hi. What is the mood like? Tell us.
Well, we're seeing an increasing creepiness of Russian military influence here in Crimea. There's been several local media outlets that have been shut down over the last couple of days. I've been visiting with local journalists who are trying to keep their television stations on the air, because right now, most of Crimea, if you want local news, all you can get is the new state-owned, state-controlled television station. And that means that the pro-Moscow slant of events is the only thing that's coming through to people's living rooms. So there are dozens of local journalists that are trying to keep information both free and objective and on the air here in Crimea, which is against the Russian-backed local administration's wishes.
So Meg, there's only one voice coming out of the local TV in Crimea, and that's the voice basically of state-controlled Russian-backed media. Is that fair to say?
Yes, for the most part, yes. If you're one of the 2 million people who live in Crimea, I mean, this is the fault line. This is ground zero for where this international diplomatic tension is playing out, and their future is dependent on what happens in capitals like Paris and Moscow and Washington. And so what happens, from a day-to-day basis, whether there is military provocations from the Russian side or the Ukrainian side, these are local troops, local families who are all affected. And the two TV stations that have been covering events on the ground have had their licenses pulled, basically. And so the new local administration in Crimea, they have control of most of the way that news is presented here.
Now, Meg, we're looking at, or we have been looking at pictures of soldiers, armed soldiers on the streets in Crimea. This one is one of nighttime or early evening, and we were looking at some daytime shots as well. How heavy is the troop presence that you've seen? Is it oppressive, or is it more like, local police?
Well, over the weekend, it was incredibly heavy. You had a lot of troop movements, Russian military trucks, logistical trucks, troop-moving vehicles that were going into different parts of the Crimea. Now they're in the places where they want to occupy, and they're not moving around very much. On major roads between where the airport is, for example, in the middle of the peninsula in Simferopol, the roads down to Sebastopol, where the naval bases are, they're full of checkpoints, and those are all manned by soldiers who are carrying Russian-made weapons, and they have Russian vehicles behind them, but they're not identifying themselves where they're from. So the people here, they're getting used to the fact that there's a lot more security on the street, and some of them like that. To be quite frank, some of the local people are glad that there's stability instead of chaos on the streets.
Okay, well, apparently no chaos there. Thank you very much, Meg Coker of the Wall Street Journal. We appreciate your time.